Today has been a very strange day. I had a feeling it would be, and of course, I pushed. I do that. I'm antagonistic in that regard. Um, Something kept happening to me today, and I think you would find it strange too. At least I know I did. Um, and I want to rattle something off because some of you guys know I've been run through Bible stuff again. These two things are connected in a big way. So, one of the first interactions, and I thought maybe I was wrong. There was a woman, and she was one of the Portland people, who jog with babies, and she jogged past me while I was on a skateboard, and I could have sworn she said, and she didn't confirm it. She kept going. I turned around and said, "What?" And she just kept running. But I could have sworn she said, "Reading the Bible." And it's not something that Portland people usually bring up. Most people here in Portland, if you mention the Bible, they'll pop jokes. And keep in mind, I've bashed the Bible numerous times over throughout my days, well before I even lived in Portland, Oregon. I mean, I'm not above that. But it was strange, and maybe I didn't hear it right. Maybe I didn't hear it right. Sometimes you hear what you want to hear too. I mean, yeah, reality sings to itself, but maybe I'm wrong about that. So the second interaction, I distinctly heard, and the point is, it was driven home for me. So I'm sitting at the back of the bus. I'm on the left hand side of the back of the bus. There's another dude to the right hand side. I got my feet on a skateboard. Bus isn't too packed, and a homeless dude piles on with some garbage. He said, I mean, some of it was probably his belongings too, but he also had some garbage. I think he was also collecting some cans. Came all the way to the back of the bus, and he sat between the two of us. And that's fine and dandy. Within seconds, he was staring at me, and so I looked over at him, and he said, "Reading the Bible?" And I just cracked a smile, and I looked at him, and I told him, no, because I was holding, not one of these ones, but here, one of these, this. I was holding this in my hand, and I was writing. And so I turned it so he couldn't see what I was writing, but I told him, no, it's not a little Bible. And so then he produced a teeny little Bible. I'm pretty sure it's one of the ones, a lot of the street preachers will hand out, which is, I'm trying to make sure I'm not showing you guys anything else. A little bit bigger than one of these little composition notebooks, if I'm not mistaken. And so I told him, no, but I do have one that I've been running through at home. It's a little bit bigger. And he just got up and he walked away. That was the interaction. He went to the front of the bus and sat down. Um, Strange. I think it was very, very strange, but two moments today. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about the first one. He definitely asked me the same thing I thought I heard earlier in the day. And then on my way home, it was the second to last bus driver. And this is weird too, because people definitely don't bring this stuff up, especially if they're working here in Portland, Oregon, because you never know, you might get fired for talking about it. It's Portland. Um, but I got on a bus, and there's a lot of people on the bus. And for some reason, I don't know why, but the driver asked me, "You've been reading the Bible lately?" I was like, "Yeah, matter of fact, I have been." And he's like, "Oh, that's good. That's good." I was like, "Okay, yeah." I was like, "You having a good day?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm having a good day." I was like, "Yeah, me too. It's been weird, but it's been good." And I was like, "All right." And so I went to the back of the bus. Happened three times. I don't know what to make of that. Um, Very strange. Very strange. What I was going to tell you too is a lot of times if you bring up a Bible, because this happened to me the other day. So I got two of these because the printing job on these is not very good. This one still has a bunch of oddities, but it had less oddities in there than the other one. I returned the other one to UPS. When I showed up, I said, "Yeah, I have a Bible to return." And I got a smirk and a laugh and a bunch of other, snarky shit out of the gal that was going to, process the return. And so she popped a joke, and it's a joke you guys might have heard before. She said, "Didn't like the ending?" And that's funny. I've heard it before, but it's still funny. Um, and it's relevant to some of the things that I want to teach you guys, but I'm not going to leave in this video. Um, so what gets my goat without spelling it all out for you guys is there is a disharmonious something or other having to do with the Bible that nobody understands. I guarantee it. And it colors the entire thing in a way that it's another broken clock, if you guys know what I'm talking about, in a huge way. And some of you might reason some of that out. You might say, "Oh, yeah, there's some books missing." And that's part of what I'm driving at. The really neat thing I want to show you guys is undeniably amazing. What I'm Just to give you something more to chew on, the divinity having to do with this has been stripped from it. And I could show you why that is. But I'm looking for people who want to keep up, put in the time, use their brain, and I don't know people who are willing to do that for the most part. There's a few people out there that are chipped away at some stuff. I don't know anybody else that can show me aspects of what I'm driving at so that we're on even keel. It gets my goat. It really gets my goat. Because I've said it a lot. We supposedly live in the age of information when in fact it's the age of disinformation. Most people haven't figured that much out, which is why they don't understand anything. I guarantee it. And this applies to you and I alike. This is something that I had to grapple with, I had to confront head on. And I've told you guys the methodology behind, beginning to pull your head out of your ass and get past it. I've spelled that out so many goddamn times. And not all of you, but the overwhelming majority of people who I do interact with. I mean, today on Instagram, I've been trying not to log into that, but I did for a brief moment. And one of the guys on there, it's the subject matter I can't talk about on TikTok and YouTube because these people own those two things. But I had left a comment about the Red Cross records. And so he was asking me to think for him. And I told him one of my canned responses, as somebody who respects you to think for you. So, of course, he wrote me back because he's a superficial internet baby. He wants something from me. We've never met. I don't owe him shit. It's just as good as a bum coming up to me or, a yuppie coming up to me and saying, will you do this for me? Why would I do something for either of these people? Maybe if they were actually in a tight spot. I mean, the other day I returned a dog to somebody and I helped a bee escape a bus. Little stuff like that really matters. But most people out there, they just want what they want. And that should trouble you. So this guy was asking me to think for him. And so I drove the point home a couple different times over because after he reacted, he also, shit out an emoji. So I reminded him, a smart person. I think I told him only a fool would attempt to illustrate a point using an emoji, another canned response I can dish up often because these kids are dumb. They are dumb. If he was thinking for himself to begin with, he would never have used an emoji. And that might not sound like a big thing to most of you out there because you have low standards and you can't recognize a red flag, which means you are part of the problem, which means you are more likely than not believing in, repeating in, and misleading others by example, having to do with that, disinformation train that I mentioned, the age of disinformation, which means you're nowhere close to being useful to you and I, or people that you know, like, and love. And if you heard any noises, that's probably my my animalistic neighbor, who's literally an animal. Either the possum or the skunk having a good old time because, the sun has dropped out of the sky, for lack of better words. And he likes to, good times. I'll shut up. I really want to show somebody what I'm driving at with this biblical stuff. I almost left part of it online last night, but I need to stop throwing you guys bones, especially huge fucking things like this, because I've never found anybody who understands what I'm driving at. They haven't even come anywhere close. Before I go, I've told you guys before, you can throw most subjects at me and I can show you things that nobody else is bringing up. Because people aren't cooking with fire. They're not thinking for themselves. They're jerking each other off in a circle jerk. And that's what society is by and large, unfortunately. By design, not coincidence, and most people haven't figured it out. I use analogies to complain about this. People are smearing shit on the wall and telling each other to talk about it and how great it is, and they do. Like, click repost. That kid that asked me to think for him about the Red Cross records, I did pop a bad joke too. I told him last Thursday. I left him another comment with some dots after it. But most people, they can't pick up on, sarcasm either because they're not very bright. I think that was more on the nose, so I think he understood, but you never know. what I'm driving at is I could have told him an answer that sounds, vaguely correct, however, it wouldn't have been, and he probably would have believed it and repeated it because he's not going to look into it. For fuck's sake, he's asking me to think for him. This is a problem. So, just the short time that I've been running through, biblical stuff again, I guarantee I have already amassed a number of things that I hadn't, some of it I circled back to, but some of these things, I don't think it had dawned on me years ago. Um, I haven't sat down and focused on this as heavily as I have been in the last however many days. I think the 14th, I think, is roughly what I said when I finally got one of these in the mail. I haven't done this in a while. And these, I mean, I told you guys a bunch of analogies. I can show you doors you didn't know were there, and I can show you how to unlock them, and how the fact that they lead to other doors, and these doors lead somewhere. But most people don't realize that there are doors, and they're just talking about, the ornate decorations on the wall, or however else I should put it. They're jerking each other off in a circle jerk. I'm going to run out of time, and most of you probably don't care, and this video is probably not going to have a lot of views because it's not 1 minute, and what the fuck do I know?